your listeners might like that better too.
No, I sometimes I feel the same way. I'm just like, yeah, we got to get to the news now, and I feel like they kind of feel that way. So what's going on with you, Congressman Westerman? How's Washington D.C.? Are you in D.C. now, or are you back home?
No, I'm back in Arkansas, and I'm actually traveling the 4th District right now, so I hope we don't lose you as we're going down the road.
No, I understand.
But,
yeah.
Be up in up on the Mulberry River later this afternoon for a ceremony up there to recognize the 50 years of the National Wild and Scenic River Act, and getting out and visiting with constituents today.
Well, that's good. Can we talk just a little bit? I mean, I feel like one of the biggest things, it was I don't know about several weeks ago, but it was a little bit ago, but it was the omnibus vote. So talk a little bit about the omnibus vote. How did you vote on that bill?
Well, I voted against it, Paul, and it's not because there weren't some good things in the bill. There were some really good things in the bill. Some stuff with the military, some issues related to management on our national forest that I've literally worked on since I've been in Congress. So, it wasn't everything I've worked on, but a lot of the work that I've done for the past 3 years, some major components of that got shoved into that omnibus bill. But the bottom line is it will increase the deficit $1 trillion. It was a 2,300-page bill that had you been able to read continuous, you'd had to read 132 pages per hour from the time it was filed to the time to vote on it to even read through it, much less read through it where you could comprehend it and understand what's in it. And it just was loaded up with pork and wants from Democratic senators who held out to the very end to get what they wanted in this bill. So I can't vote for something like that. I don't think that's what the voters of the 4th District of Arkansas expect from me. And I don't know how to change the process other than opposing it and working hard to do something different. But a lot of times it comes down to the 60-vote rule in the Senate, because we had already passed all 12 appropriation bills in the House. Last September, they were sitting in the Senate, and that's how the government should be funded, but they never took a single one of those bills up for a vote. We got into these continuing resolutions. Mm-hmm. The government shutdowns that were supposedly going to happen. I guess it did happen for over a weekend. And then you get another crisis situation, and this mother lode of all bills comes across that's not just the spending bills to get us through the end of this year, but it's got all kinds of policy and law changes in it. So I don't think that's how our founders intended for our country to function, and I'm just not going to be a part of it.
Yeah. Well, and, it was a fiscal nightmare, and it did add a lot to the debt. And like you said, it did do some good things. But, yeah, I can totally understand that vote, because at some point, no one even talks about the debt anymore. It used to be something that people on the right talked about. They were concerned about. It doesn't seem to be the case anymore. What are your thoughts on that?
I appreciate you talking about it and reporting on it. It's not that people aren't talking about it. It's just that it doesn't get the headlines in the news. It's not, it's not Russia or what the latest thing is that the mainstream media wants to report about. But I can promise you I'm still talking about it. I've got a lot of colleagues that are talking about it. And I've got a piece of legislation that I'm working on that it's similar to something I sponsored in the state legislature. It was to cap the growth rate in spending. And, I serve on the budget committee, and we had a revised baseline that was put out by CBO a couple of weeks ago. I sat through the hearing on that, and I studied the report. And, they're projecting over the next 10 years we're going to spend $12 trillion that we don't have. So we're going to take our $21 trillion debt and add another 12 to that in 10 years. But if you look at what CBO calls the baseline, they're increasing.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts,
and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Involved because, let's see, I was a member of some other gun groups, and I remember when they passed the law in 2013, and we used to discuss it among ourselves. I used to work at a local gun dealer here, and it was Wednesday night prior to Thanksgiving, and the last customer of the night I was waiting on. I was selling him a gun who was buying it for his son. Well, it turns out that was, at the time, Arkansas Majority Leader. I can't even think of his name now. Anyway, he was telling, we were talking about, I said, tell me about Act 746, and he explained to me the whole detail, how it came about. Westerman, Bruce Westerman, that's who it was. Mm-hmm. So I got it directly from the horse's mouth, and then I ended up finding the Patriots group and the old Arkansas Carry group, and that's how I got involved.
Great. That's fantastic. And obviously, I mean, it's been beneficial, because it's good to know what your rights are, and of course now we have a situation where some in positions of power are saying, well, check with your local prosecutor before you carry a weapon. And it's like, okay, well, the law says what the law says. So it's really frustrating right now. I wish we had our leaders, kind of just being more clear and just telling people what the law is. I mean, regardless of whether or not it's a big change or not from the status quo.
Well, unfortunately, we're still butting heads with that. We still have new people showing up on the group almost daily. And we had somebody yesterday ask, hey, has anybody called the ASP recently and asked them what they're going to do if somebody is caught open carrying and they have a concealed carry permit? And again, they were told if you're open carrying and have a permit, they're going to take your permit away. And we just shake our head and say, how could they possibly still be saying that? Again, this is not everybody that feels that way, but why a citizen should be able to call a state agency and get the correct information. But apparently they can't. They were even told they won't even follow Act 486. I mean, how could you sit and tell somebody that you're basically going to ignore a bill passed by the House?
So they said that. Hang on, this is now a law, and this was passed last year. I believe it was State Representative John Payton's bill, and it is called now Act 486. So look this up, folks. Now, Felix, tell us what this did. And you're saying that the Arkansas State Police is now saying they're just going to ignore the law. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's what this person was told on this telephone call.
Okay, all right. So what is 486?
Well, what happened, we all know what happened to Drew Tanner at the Walmart open carry incident.
Yes.
Okay, he was the one open carrying and now got a lawsuit against state police. Eventually, the powers that be decided to pass a law that says, look, just because you got a concealed carry permit, we're not going to violate your Second Amendment rights. And this act basically is stopping the state police, one, from removing somebody's concealed carry permit if you're open carrying. And two, it basically reaffirms Arkansans' Second Amendment rights. And it specifies in here the Second Amendment in Arkansas, Article 5 of the Arkansas Code. So they're basically reminding people and basically putting it in the code where it's readable that you have a right to carry any way you see fit in Arkansas.
I mean, and I thought it was one of the silver linings in a session that was mostly about big government. I mean, here was an example of John Payton doing a really good thing here and trying to put a check on the government's authority and the power. And, you know, this whole thing is frustrating because, I mean, we didn't even have a concealed carry license in the state of Arkansas till the 90s. So ask yourself how people were exercising their Second Amendment rights before that. How were they doing it? Were they just in blatant violation of the law? It's like, no, we have been psychologically conditioned to believe that we have to have this permission slip in the first place. And at this point, there's a benefit to having it if you want to go across state lines or something. But respond to that, Felix.
That's exactly right. And I just in dealing with people that live here, it seems that people in the outer regions of Arkansas have had it better than the people of the inner city, per se. So somebody in Little Rock before was not going to be able to walk around with a gun, whereas somebody in western Arkansas, southern Arkansas, northern may have been able to get away with it because it's more country boys. They more understand the Second Amendment than the big city life.
Yeah. And so you think you think that was the motivation behind, well, we need a way to regulate who can have a gun in a bigger city like Little Rock? Was that why they decided to do this?
Well, I think that was part of the reason, but I've also heard it was also money driven. They're drawing a lot more money by the concealed carry by issuing the concealed carry permits as opposed to not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's about money now.
You got to understand too. A lot of gun people, even amongst ourselves, there are gun people who consider themselves pro two-way, but they still demand, they still like having that permit because it shows at least you've been checked out. Because we just can't trust everybody with a gun. There's even gun people that still feel this way. So it's not like this is just liberal versus conservative, anti-gun versus gun. There are gun people who prefer the concealed carry permit too.
Yeah, so I've really come to this realization. I guess maybe in the last year or so, when you think about the idea of self-defense as a human right. I mean, just like your freedom of speech or your right to assemble or freedom of the press or your freedom of religion or freedom to be secure in your papers and your effects, you also have a right to defend yourself and your property, and it's a human right. And,
well, I'd say,
go ahead.
Is the Second Amendment or your right to bear arms, is that considered to be a civil right? And if it is, then anybody who is against carrying a firearm to defend themselves, are they not against civil rights?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think about the statistics. I mean, a lot of people, and this is nationwide, they bought into the concealed carry thing because it does make them feel secure. Like, okay, they don't realize that they're essentially saying, well, I have to pay a licensing fee for the government to sell me back my right. Okay, we all, this is, I feel like, a human need. We want the government to be good. We want this affirmation, it's in a little way it's just kind of like a laziness, and so we want to have this government validate us, and I'm approved to carry a weapon and carry a gun because they've given me this license back. And this is all over the country that this has happened, and this is the way most people think that the Second Amendment should be regulated today. But I know Act 746 or the patrons of Act 746. Let's just look at what the state of Arkansas's law says, and it doesn't have even a penalty. I mean, we're waiting on an opinion from the Attorney General about, well, if you do get caught with a weapon concealed without a license, what's the penalty? Where is it in the statute?
Right, and it's taken her a while to answer that too.
Yes, it is. I know. We're still waiting. I think it's a great question. Again, that was a letter written to her by Senator Linda Collins Smith. She was the one that started this inquiry, and so I'm really excited to get an answer to that. So what do we do? Okay, I want to go back to Act 486, Felix. Did we lose Felix? I think. Felix, are you there? All right, well, we'll have to get Felix back on the line. Go ahead and looks like we lost Felix. I could hear myself for a second. Did you hear that? Anyway, I want to go here. He's calling back right now. I want to go back to this 486 because essentially what Felix said is that there was somebody who claims that somebody at the Arkansas State Police said that they were just going to ignore 486. So, Felix, we got you back on the line, and I appreciate it. Sorry we dropped your call, Felix. But so let's go back to 486. What do we do if it is in fact true that this person was told by the Arkansas State Police or somebody there that they're just going to ignore 486? I mean, what is our recourse at that point? How do we get them to start following the law?
Well, that's a tough question because a lot of us have some kind of self-defense insurance, and especially if they have some of the better ones where you're covered if you're just merely arrested, because people need to understand this. You can basically be arrested for carrying a gun. If that law enforcement officer decides to arrest you, you're going to be handcuffed,
right,
or you're going to be cited, and now you're going to have to fight it in court. Now, eventually, they'll probably never charge you. However, you're going to have to spend the money to defend that. Now, there should be some recourse for you to fight false charges, but unfortunately in Arkansas, there's not, at least under certain circumstances. You saw that. I don't know if you saw that case. It just happened. The video that just came out for Walnut Ridge for that law enforcement there.
No, I didn't. What happened? What happened?
Of course, it did. Oh, it didn't involve. He wasn't an armed. He was somebody who worked for the railroad. The video just came out yesterday. I'm not sure exactly when the incident happened, but this officer was chastising this man, and you just have to watch the video. It'll literally make you mad. And the man has already filed a federal lawsuit now against the city and the police officer and everything. But like I say, there was no gun involved, but this guy was just out of control. I mean, this law enforcement officer was literally out of control.
It's sad.
But again, you have no recourse in Arkansas law to fight this. And it's like, why should you have to be arrested just for them to just drop the charges against you because they know that there was no reason for them to arrest you to begin with?
Yeah. So, and that's where it's like, okay, well, you don't want to assume worse motives. I mean, it could be that there's an officer that still doesn't know what the law is because the higher-ups have not told them. But then at some point, it's like, is this just harassment? And that's what gets frustrating. And this is why our politicians need to take action, and the governor needs to correctly define constitutional carry in what it is, because when there is a growing rift between law-abiding citizens and our law enforcement that we care about very much, and I'm talking about the Arkansas State Police and others, that's something that you don't want to let that just hang out there and simmer. You don't want there to be a divide. These are people that are protecting and serving us, and they're doing that because we as the people have decided to give them that power, and then we as the people have our representatives that change the laws accordingly, whether it's Act 746 or Act 486, and we expect them to enforce the ones on the books, even if they disagree with it, even if it changes a little bit of the culture. That's part of working for the government. The people get to make changes in their government.
Well, I've tried to make it clear to a lot of people, the problems we've had after 746 was passed. We wouldn't be anywhere where we are today if it wasn't for people like us and our group and others who are basically pushing it and shoving it down their faces, because they would just basically ignore it.
Yes, they would.
So, on one hand, we're activists. We're trying to be activists in a good way. We're not trying to make it a free-for-all with firearms, but at the same time, the law is the law, and it has to be enforced on people, like the difference between concealed carry and open carry. I'm not a big open carry proponent per se, but at the same time, what does it take to stop the average person from seeing a gun and going, oh my God, he's got a gun? Well, the only way to do that is to get people used to seeing firearms on people.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And open carry is one of the best ways to do that, because if it's covered up, well, nobody knows you got a gun. Now, you can argue what's the best way to carry, open carry, concealed carry. That's an individual decision.
Yeah.
But we have to get people used to seeing firearms and not jumping out of their skin just by the sight of one.
Yeah, and if we can't do that here in Arkansas, we really got problems. Let me. Have you been following this Pennsylvania arrest out of the Starbucks? Have you been following this at all, Felix?
Yes, I have a little bit, and that's one of the questions I brought up in the group. I said, now, here's the thing. We're always told if you carry into a business, and whether you're concealed carrying, open carrying, and the business decides that they don't like you with a gun in there, okay, they can ask you to leave. And then you really have no choice but to leave at that point, because then you're trespassing. Okay, so a lot of guys want to puff their chest out. Well, it's my right to carry. Well, it's also a private business. If they decide they don't want that firearm in there, then that's up to them. However, we have to leave, otherwise it's trespassing.
Correct.
Now, let's take this to what happened at the Starbucks. Here's these two black guys who were sitting in a Starbucks, and I've heard these black guys are actually realtors. They're not just bums, but I'm not 100% sure about that. They were waiting for a friend of theirs to show up.
Yeah, it does not look good.
To go to the bathroom.
Yeah, go ahead. It doesn't look good. I've seen the video. It is interesting, but I was kind of like you. I was like, well, why not just leave? I mean, if you're being asked to leave, why not leave?
Right. Well, the problem here is I don't know why they did. So this was a good case of these customers are being trespassed. So legally, now again, I'm not unsure about Pennsylvania law and Arkansas law, but once you're trespassed, you have to leave. So technically, the cops were doing the right thing. They came and arrested these guys because they were told to leave and they didn't leave. Okay, fair shot. Now, what would happen if one of us was going in a facility carrying a gun and we were asked to leave and we decided not to leave? Now, these people in Starbucks is being chastised very severely for asking these people to leave because they were black. And they weren't hurting anybody. Okay, let's turn that around. If you're somebody carrying a firearm and you're asked to leave with the same business, it doesn't have to be Starbucks. It can be any business.
Yeah.
Would the same business be chastised for asking somebody to leave?
No, not like this. They'd be celebrated. They'd be like, way to go, way to promote gun-free zones that to keep us safe. That's a really good contrast, actually. I hadn't thought about that, Felix. It's really good.
Yep, that's my point.
Yeah, and I would just say, a lot of gun owners would leave, and especially there's so many gun owners that respect that sign if they see it. They say, well, I'm not going to go in there. I mean, it technically is the gun owner or the private business owner can set their own firearm policy.
It's a PHP parody.
Hey, man, you got any of that marble rock?
Yeah, I've got the hookup.
Thanks. I need a fix real bad. I'm itching to grow some government.
How much you need?
I'm gonna need a taxpayer's dime bag.
No problem, sir. 1 taxpayer dime of marble rock. Enjoy.
Thanks, man. They don't call it Little Rock for nothing. Am I right?
Did you know your state representative or state senator may be addicted to growing government? The drug is called marble rock, and too much of it will cause marble fever. Watch for the warning signs. Does your legislator suddenly display a lack of humility when faced with basic questions? Does he or she suddenly develop hubris and pride that was not present during the campaign for office? These are signs they might be smoking the terrible drug, marble rock. The solution? Detox. Vote for detox. Vote to send them home for their own good. Warning! Some politicians once voted out of office will not go home and stay in Little Rock to get their fix by lobbying, also known as the Burris Syndrome.
PHP Parody. Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
That's my point.
Yeah, and I would just say, a lot of gun owners would leave, and especially there's so many gun owners that respect that sign if they see it. They say, well, I'm not going to go in there. I mean, it technically is the gun owner or the private business owner can set their own firearm policy on their own property. Now, I know a lot of firearm owners that will not even go to the businesses because they don't want to give up their right to protect themselves there, and so they're just not going to spend their money there. But this is about freedom of choice here, and honestly, with the whole Starbucks thing, Felix, I mean, I've been in Starbucks, and they don't let you go to the bathroom, and they've got a sign up that I believe even says that, like paying, if you want to use the bathroom, you got to buy something. It's just their policy, and yet now they're it is crazy. We really don't know what the consequences are going to be of having such a hypersensitive society at this point, and it is just fascinating watching this and ridiculous at the same time. Felix Normand from Patriots of X746, I appreciate it. I'm being waved on. I got to go. So
thank you.
All right.
See you later.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Folks, go to Facebook.com, search for Patriots of X746, and ask to become a member of this very, very giant and influential group here in Arkansas on the Second Amendment. Back in a moment.
The baseline nearly 6% per year every year. And if you reduce that baseline, CBO calls that a cut. That's how messed up Washington, D.C. is. But if we would simply hold the baseline to 2% or 2.5%, we could balance the budget in 8 years, even with everything that's going on now, if we would do that. So I'm working on legislation to put language around a proposal like that. And that's the kind of stuff we're going to have to do if we ever want to change the trajectory that we're on. But we can't just sit here and say that, we've got an economy that's growing great. They're saying now 3.3% for the GDP, but we're still going to grow spending at the baseline level at nearly 6% per year. The math doesn't work when you're already $21 trillion in debt and you're spending at a rate twice as fast as the economy's growing in the federal government. So, and I would even be willing to say this, that from the purpose of the Budget Committee is to put a ceiling for expenditures and a floor for revenue. So that gives instruction to the rest of the House on how to write tax bills and how to write spending bills and how to write policy that makes those things growth in spending to the growth rate of the economy and say that the spending can't grow at a faster rate of the economy. And I would be willing to also say that taxes have to increase at the same rate as the economy, because you know what? We collect more revenue at a rate faster than what the economy is growing, and that's even with the tax cut, and that's in the CBO baseline. So the problem is not having enough revenue. The problem is spending too much money. And I guess I'm going to keep saying that till my head hurts, but until we address that fundamental issue, we're never going to change the deficit spending and the debt that we have in this country, and it is a serious problem.
Yes, it is, and at some point you have to pay the bills, and that's the day of. It's like we've got to get our fiscal house in order now. The discretionary spending versus non-discretionary spending. I mean, we've talked about this before, Congressman Westerman. I mean, this is the non-discretionary spending, basically the stuff that you don't have an option. I mean, that's what really needs reform, right? I mean, because that's so much of the money that they get every year.
That's closing in on 3/4 of everything that the federal government spends, and it's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, about 80-plus social welfare programs, and interest on.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
You're listening to the best of Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
To the program and welcome Republican gubernatorial candidate Jan Morgan's on the line. Jan, thanks for coming on.
Oh, good morning, Paul Harrell. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing really well. Hey, so listen, I covered this a little bit yesterday, and I've listened to many of your stump speeches, and I have never heard you tell a lie, but there's some, and specifically Senator Jason Rapert on Facebook. He was saying that you critiquing what's going on here in the state, that you're telling lies. Address that if you don't mind.
Exactly. That is a typical strategy of the left, and why am I not surprised that the counterfeit Republicans in this party are using the campaign strategies of the left? I'm not surprised at all. When you can't rebut what your opponent is saying, then you go after your opponent with personal attacks. See, rather than just talk about what am I lying about, they just want to call me names. That says more about them than it does me. Look, in fact, Paul, on the campaign trail, it wasn't only Jason Rapert and Jamie Barker and all the rest of the people who are water boys for Asa Hutchinson who've made that response. But I was speaking to Pulaski County Republican women just last week. Have you heard about what happened there?
I heard, a little bird told me that there was some people maybe kind of heckling, or one person heckling.
Not just one, no, not some people. In fact, by and large, the group was wonderful to me. The group was fine. But what happened was the leader, the president of the Pulaski County Republican women, started yelling at me in the middle of my speech. She interrupted my speech to start yelling at me that I was not being honest. I was lying. I can't even remember exactly. She started yelling, which I thought was, it was unbelievable. I've never seen anyone completely lose control of themselves the way she did. But I stopped my speech and I looked at her and I said, "Excuse me?" And then she was beside herself. The reason she was beside herself, Paul, is because she's very openly an ASA supporter, which is fine. I don't have any problem with that. We all have our people that we support and racist. But as the president of a Republican committee, it is against Republican rules ever to show bias in a primary. That is a written policy of the Republican Party. And she was an open violation. I excused and overlooked it the first time. She accused me of being a liar, and I looked at her and I said, okay, excuse me. I'll be glad to answer your question when I finish my speech, but let me just assure you and everyone in this room that for 27 years of my life, I was an award-winning television investigative journalist. A journalist's credibility relies on truth and putting factual information out there. So I said I can gladly, and we'll be glad to supply anyone and everyone in this room with validation, documentation, written, that the information I'm putting out there for you is fact-based. I just don't, I have no, I can't, I can be accountable for everything that's coming out of my mouth. Mm-hmm. So shut her down for a minute. I continue my speech. And the reason she yelled at me again is because as I spoke, she saw more and more people who had been misled by counterfeit Republicans, including our current governor, Asa Hutchinson, with carefully crafted language. As she saw me transforming those people from Asa supporters to Jan supporters, it upset her so terribly. She yelled at me again and interrupted me once again. At the second interruption, I stopped, I looked at her, and I said, okay, here we go. First of all, you are not allowed, as the president of a committee, to be openly biased against an opponent, or against any opponent, any Republicans in a primary. You are in violation by your actions of Republican Party rules. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to call for your resignation, although I should, because I understand this is a very passionate time. I'm glad you're excited and passionate about your candidate. But I'm going to ask you, once again, do not interrupt me. Let me finish my speech. And at that point, the other women, including the other women who were office holders in the Republican Party in that county, looked at her and agreed with me and said verbally, out loud, that's right, she is right. Ms. Morgan is right. You can't do that. You shouldn't do that.
Good.
Paul, yes, they stood up for me. So I finished my speech, and then, of course, she jumped up and said, oh, and now we're going to have Missy Irvin on. She's going to speak for the governor. And I just said, I want it duly noted that last month when the governor had his time here, no one from my campaign was asked and invited to come here to rebut anything the governor said. So once again, here is another situation where there's been open bias against the candidate or candidate. So, they're getting desperate. The other side is getting desperate, and all they can do is call me names instead of coming back and actually showing and saying anything. I said, show me one thing I've said that's not true. When I put information out there, it's fact-based.
It is, and it's powerful stuff. I think people are. It's maybe a combination of two things. One, the facts of the spending record, the advocated tax increases by ASA, and then the past tax increases, the tire tax and things like that, digital downloads. I think that's people don't want to hear that because, and here's the second reason. And this is, again, a leftist tactic. You mentioned that it's a leftist tactic to when you don't have anything else, you just start to call people names. Well, personal attacks. I think that we have a little bit of a leftist cult of personality problem where instead of looking at the policies that somebody's advocating or what they've done, they maybe just really like Asa, and they think, and they've always been told he's a nice guy, and they don't want to admit that he may be a nice guy, but that he's actually for bigger and ever expanding government.
True, and also there are so many Republicans that have not been paying attention to what's truly happening in our government, and when you start telling them the truth, it is shocking to them. They cannot handle it, and steadily. Here's a great concern I have, Paul. I know without a doubt that it is the leadership of the Republican Party's determined efforts to just grow across the board in all elected positions across the state, transforming Democrats into Republicans without really caring if they truly embrace the Republican Party platform. I'm not saying that because I think that. I'm saying because I actually heard it at a committee meeting spoken by Sarah Jo Reynolds when she stood up before the committee and she said, We want you to tell Democrats who are running for office, any office, that if they don't change over and run as Republicans, we are going to put candidates and races against them. And Paul, it's very dangerous. And I did get up and speak on that. This was long before I was even running for office. I did get up and counter that when I spoke to that group. I said, that is a very dangerous path to take. I don't want people to just transform to Republican Party because if they don't, because of threats, they're not going to be able to win. I want them to transform to the Republican Party because they truly embrace and believe in the Republican Party platform. And I'm telling you that the problems we're having right now with counterfeit Republicans is because we have been pushing Democrats to switch over just so they can get elected. And it's wrong, and it's going to hurt us. It's going to destroy this party in the long run. And Asa Hutchinson's leadership as a progressive, establishment progressive, doing things like Democrats do, like raising taxes, growing government, increasing spending, doing nothing about corruption. In fact, sitting on his hands when Republican legislators tried to pass legislation that would help stop corruption by putting more transparency in government and showing connections, financial connections between legislators and lobbyists. Those kinds of things are going to destroy our party. We cannot do 4 more years of that. And if we do, the Democrats will take over state government once again because we will have proven that leadership and that having Republicans in control is no different than having Democrats in control, that we're still going to have the same old from career politicians. It will destroy this party, and it will be devastating for the citizens of Arkansas.
We're talking with Republican gubernatorial candidate Jan Morgan. She's on the line with us this morning. Jan, back in 2006, Asa Hutchinson was running for governor. He ran unsuccessfully, but he said that he wanted to eliminate the grocery tax altogether. Wanted to eliminate it. And, of course, Governor Beebe, when he got in office, he shrunk the grocery tax down to a minuscule amount. It's supposed to go down even further next year. And now the Tax Reform and Relief Task Force, they have a list of exemptions that they're thinking about ending, and one of those would be the grocery tax exemption. What are your thoughts on that list, and what are your thoughts on the grocery tax?
My thoughts on the list are this is just the latest disaster for the Republican Party. Paul, you're right. ACE's Tax Reform Commission is supposed to be, and they're misleading people by saying we're going to reform the current tax code. That's what they're supposed to be doing, but they're not really looking at ways to reform the current tax code in a way that's beneficial to the people. They're looking at ways to reform the tax code in a way that is beneficial to the state. And their commission is looking at raising taxes on groceries and prescriptions, as well as a slew of other areas, because they're wanting to repeal current tax exemptions. Well, when you repeal exemptions that are currently benefiting the people, that means people are going to start paying taxes on those things that they didn't have to pay taxes on in the past. How is that beneficial for the people of Arkansas? Republican leadership is supposed to be about limited government, lowering taxes, and instead, look what we're doing. As governor of this state, I would have charged that commission with finding ways to cut taxes, to lighten the tax burden off the people of this state. We are currently the most poor, among the most poor by income in America, and yet we are also among the most heavily taxed. And if the Republican Party and this tax commission does not do something to significantly lighten the tax burden off the people, once again, it's going to be devastating not only for this party, but for Arkansans. As the governor right now, should have stepped up to the plate and said, excuse me, but we don't want to look at exemptions, certainly not on products like groceries and prescriptions and used cars at $4,000 and under. Who buys cars like that? People like me, people like citizens who are trying to cut corners and save money, and now we're going to have to pay a tax on that. Give me an idea what the additional what a tax is going to be like on a $4,000 car. That kind of figure is going to break the back of people who are counting pennies. Yeah. And yes, there are hundreds of thousands of people in this state who are in that boat. We are counting pennies because of the excessive tax burden. Paul, the saddest thing I've seen on the campaign trail, and it breaks my heart, because in my view, excessive taxation is not just a fiscal issue, it is a moral issue. But the saddest thing is people are on their last leg as far as trusting government. they've lost all trust and all faith in people running for political office, and those few who are stayed on and are trying to hang in the fight are on their last hope. They're looking at me and looking me in the eye with a desperate look of, are you going to be different? Are you really going to be different? I mean, because every time we keep electing politicians who promise one thing, and then once they get into office, they deliver something else, and it's never in the interest of the people. And people are, if they walk away, Paul, if they give up, we lose. And what will happen to this state, once again, will be extremely difficult to ever turn around. Right now, so many people are paying attention and engaged in their state government, and I'm so excited that so many are in the fight, and they're giving everything they can to get me elected because they know I'm the real deal.
Yeah.
And anything and everything I do, and I can assure you, number one, we're going to cap spending, because government spending requires more taxes to feed the beast. We will cap spending, and then we will immediately get in there and start looking for ways to cut taxes, to lighten the tax burden off the backs of the people, off the backs of the businesses, and bring real tax reform to this state.
Yeah, I love all that. I think that sounds great. I'm worried in terms of this the task force and the list of exemptions. You know, I worry that they when it's all said and done, because they're going to say, well, we'll eliminate exemptions, which is a tax increase, but we'll cut taxes over here, so it'll be a net wash. But I'm worried that the government ends up getting more money. But here's a question for you: how does you or Asa, whichever one wins, facing that Democrat, in November, and having a debate with that Democrat, assuming that I'm assuming that we'll actually have a debate, because right now, of course, Asa won't debate you.
No, he won't debate me, but he'll debate the Democrat.
But isn't it going to be, you can just see the Democrat attacks are going to be on this grocery tax issue. The Democrats are going to say, you're proposing to raise a grocery tax.
It's not going to just be on that issue. It's going to be on all of the tax increases that have happened under the Hutchinson administration with Republicans in control. And if I were a Democrat, I would just pound him with that. And he cannot defend it. What is he going to say on the debate stage about why he did that? Well, because we have to take Obamacare is devastating the state. Medicaid expansion, well, why did Medicaid expansion happen? Asa, that's what I would say if I was a Democrat. You see, he cannot defend what Republicans have done on the debate stage against the Democrat, but I can, Paul. You know what I would say? I would look at Jared Henderson, and I would say, let me tell you something. The Republican Party, the establishment end of this party, just like the establishment end of the Democrat Party, has betrayed the people. I don't represent the establishment end. The establishment end was part of the problem. I'm bringing to the stage part of the solution. I represent the conservative base of the Republican Party, and I'm telling you, I'm not here to defend his record. I'm here because of his record, and we are going to be truly representing the Republican Party platform of limited government, limited taxes, and we are truly going to bring reform and tax relief to this state. So I don't have to stand up there and defend this egregious record.
That's right.
So I can take on the Democrat. We will easily defeat the Democrats in the general elections, hands down. In fact, I know Democrats in this state who are going to vote for me because they understand and they see the light that they cannot continue. This state cannot continue under this current tax burden.
Yeah.
So, I'm looking forward to being on the stage with Jared Henderson, the Democrat, and debating him and showing the people that truly living and working in Arkansas is going to be better with conservative leadership at the helm. And I am believing that there are enough good Republicans in our House and Senate who agree with me, who've been voting the wrong way, Paul, on Asa's progressive agenda simply because of his arm twisting and his threatening to put opponents against them in their primaries if they didn't go with his agenda. I believe that when we free these Republican legislators up to do the right thing by the people, that a majority of them will do so. And I'm looking forward to being the leader of the Republican Party and helping restore the power back to the people of this state.
Let me ask you this. I know you go all across the state, and you're speaking constantly.
I've been everywhere. I've been everywhere.
Yeah. So how you holding up? How you holding up with that kind of schedule?
It's exhausting, Paul, but I tell you what, the only thing that keeps me going, because people ask, we're pulling 19-hour days, 3, 4, 5 events a day. Yesterday I did 5 events, count them, 5.
Wow.
And every event, a different speech delivered because it was a different group of people concerned about different issues. But here's what keeps me going, and here's what is the wind, truly the wind beneath my wings. It is the grassroots effort and how people regular folks are out there spending their personal money to put up billboards, creating their own signs because they're truly fighting. I mean, they are trying so hard to win this race for the people, because it's truly the people's race to lose, not mine. This is not about Jan and Asa. It's about the people versus big government. That's really what it's about. And their engagement and their fight and their determination, it fuels my fire. It really does, and it keeps me going. And just when I start thinking I can't do another event in one day, I run into a person that looks me in the eye with that desperation look of, please help us.
Yeah, that's
and
great.
And it keeps me going. Yes, sir.
Well, Jan Morgan, I appreciate you throwing your hat in the ring and doing all this, because it is a sacrifice, and I appreciate you, answering the call. When people wanted you to run, you stepped up, and we're going to continue to cover this election, and best of luck to you, Jan Morgan, and be safe.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and thank you.
All righty. Jan Morgan, everybody, Republican.
Buy, sell, and trade at Triple R Pawn in Ash Flat. Firearms, computers, sporting goods, musical instruments, tools, jewelry, and everything else you can think of. It's all at Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat. Gun enthusiasts, log on now to triplrpawn.com and browse their amazing inventory. That's triplrpawn.com. You can also call them at 870-994-PAWN. That's 870-994-7296. Let the great team at Triple R Pawn help you find what you're looking for. That's Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat, triplrpawn.com, or call 870-994-PAWN.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Welcome back. Hey, folks, welcome back to the program. We have Senator Gary Stubblefield is on the line with us. Gary, welcome back, sir. You're from District 6. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, Paul. Good morning.
Good morning. Hey, real quick, can you tell us, our listeners, statewide audience, tell us District 6 geographically, just to remind folks where you are from.
Okay, District 6 includes Johnson County, Yale County, Logan County, and the biggest part of Franklin County. So we're basically in the west central Arkansas location, right next to Sebastian County. In fact, I had Sebastian County when I was in the elected to the House back in 2010. That was in my House district, but after the redistricting that took place in 2010, I was moved over to a different district, either that or run against a friend of mine in the House, and I decided to run for the Senate. That was the time that I decided to run for the Senate. So.
I'm certainly glad that you did, because you've got one of the best voting records of anybody down there, and you stand up for liberty and conservatism, and I really appreciate it. And I really appreciated your comments. The Democrat Gazette described members of the legislature kind of shocked and outraged at a recent report, an audit report on DHS. What can you tell us about what that report entailed?
Well, the day before we had the regular audit meeting, I sat on the Legislative Audit Committee of counties and municipalities. We go over hundreds and hundreds of small towns all over the state of Arkansas and counties that have findings dealing with. I mean, it's hard to explain all the things they deal with, and a lot of these are repeat findings. Some of these things have went on for years. And the thing about it is, these counties and municipalities, they do stand the chance of losing, some of these turnback funds if they don't correct and rectify the problems that legislative audit has uncovered. And that's, that can be big to those people that live in those counties and cities. But when you're talking about a state agency that, a $9 billion state agency that has 7,400 employees, and the fact of the matter is, it's bad enough to have repeat findings. But when I learned that some of these findings go all the way back 2.5 to 3 years, I just felt like that was very unacceptable. And it's very troubling when you have an agency this size that's responsible for 600,000 or 700,000 people, Arkansans, on Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those are on traditional Medicaid, Arkansas Works, and they're responsible for many of the federally funded programs which we have to deal with, which have an impact on the safety and stability of our abused and neglected children all over the state. So that was just very, very troubling to me, because that's going to affect the whole state. I just had a big problem with it. I had sat there for 6 years, heard many of these same excuses over and over and over, and what it came down to, I just about had enough.
You're quoted in the Gazette. I think this agency needs to get its house in order, and they need to do it quickly, because we're talking about a $9 billion.
Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
The debt, those 5 things make up 3/4 of everything the federal government spends. Now, that omnibus bill a few weeks ago, that was, for the most part, discretionary spending. So we jacked the deficit up by $1 trillion on the discretionary side, but the non-discretionary or the mandatory is what's definitely driving the deficit, and it's growing at astronomical rates, and that's part of it. You got all these baby boomers that are retiring that are using Medicare and Social Security at a higher rate than it's been funded at, and then you've got Medicaid, which is an endless pit, and you got all these social welfare programs, and then you got interest on the debt. That it is what it is. And you think when you're $21 trillion in debt, every percentage point that the interest rates go up, that's another $210 billion of payment on interest on the debt. So, if we were to see interest rates go up 3 or 4 points, and I remember when I was a kid, interest rates were 10 to 20%. We would go bankrupt we would wreck our economy in a major hurry if we saw 10 to 15% interest rate.
Yeah, it'd be overnight. I mean, I think it would be one day, and then you wake up the next day, and it's just kind of, chaos for sure. Well, so let me ask you this: we're talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman. The Speaker, Paul Ryan, says he's ending and winding down his service. How was that taken? I understand there was a you guys caucus, and that's when he announced, and then the press got wind of it maybe a little early. But I mean, what are your thoughts on Speaker Paul Ryan and his exit coming up soon?
Well, I wish him well. He says he wants to spend more time with his family. I can certainly understand that. And I think until you've been around someone that's in that position and you see the amount of time and effort that it takes. I mean, since the day he's been elected Speaker, my observation is he's been like a jet rocket with the afterburners on. I mean, just going as hard as he can go all the time. And, it's a job that wears on you. He's the one that's having to negotiate with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, and he's the one that led the House to get all 12 appropriation bills passed, but then got jammed because of the what was happening over in the Senate. And I was walking with Trey Gowdy the other morning, and he's retiring too. I was asking him, Trey, what are you going to do when you get out of office? And he was telling me about his plans to maybe teach at a college and go back and practice law. And he asked me if I saw what he had written about Paul Ryan's retirement. I said, no, I didn't see it. And he said, well, the last line said something that if you don't like the job that Paul did and you think he's a bad person, he said there's no restriction for anybody in this country to serve as Speaker of the House, so you ought to just get in line and put your name in the hat. And the point he was making is that that job is naturally going to take a lot of flack from both your friends and your enemies. And I can't help but respect the job that Paul did. I didn't agree with everything, but I've seen it from a position that not a lot of other people have seen.
Yeah.
How difficult that job is.
Well, and they were talking about what his legacy is, and kind of this goes back to the spending. I mean, the tax cuts are great. I know everybody's proud of that, and people have more money in their paychecks. But I kind of feel like he did want to get spending under control. I mean, that's when he kind of went on the national stage, or was kind of was catapulted that way. I mean, I remember seeing some of the videos about trying to get the deficit and the debt under control, and it's unfortunate that we're still having this conversation because there just doesn't seem to be the political will to do anything about it.
Right, and there's still a strong push to do something about it. Don't think the political will's not there. It's just getting the number of votes that you need and getting.
Right.
I think getting the electorate to understand how important this debt is, and we've got to get folks in the Senate and in the House that will address this issue, because the issue is not going away. It's not magically going to disappear overnight. So we have to continue working on it.
We got the National Guard, going down to the border. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a great move.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
You're listening to the best of Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Hey, folks, welcome back to the program. We have Senator Gary Stubblefield is on the line with us. Gary, welcome back, sir. You're from District 6. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, Paul. Good morning.
Good morning. Hey, real quick, can you tell us, our listeners, statewide audience, tell us District 6 geographically, just to remind folks where you are from.
Okay, District 6 includes Johnson County, Yale County, Logan County, and the biggest part of Franklin County. So we're basically in the west central Arkansas location,
right
next to Sebastian County. In fact, I had Sebastian County when I was elected to the House back in 2010. That was in my House district, but after the redistricting that took place in 2010, I was moved over to a different district. Either that or run against a friend of mine in the House, and I decided to run for the Senate. That was the time that I decided to run for the Senate. So.
I'm certainly glad that you did, because you've got one of the best voting records of anybody down there, and you stand up for liberty and conservatism, and I really appreciate it. And I really appreciated your comments. The Democrat Gazette described members of the legislature kind of shocked and outraged at a recent report, an audit report on DHS. What can you tell us about what that report entailed?
Well, the day before we had the regular audit meeting, I sat on the Legislative Audit Committee of counties and municipalities. We go over hundreds and hundreds of small towns all over the state of Arkansas and counties that have findings dealing with. I mean, it's hard to explain all the things they deal with, and a lot of these are repeat findings. Some of these things have went on for years. And the thing about it is, these counties and municipalities, they do stand the chance of losing, some of these turnback funds if they don't correct and rectify the problems that legislative audit has uncovered. And that's, that can be big to those people that live in those counties and cities. But when you're talking about a state agency a $9 billion state agency that has 7,400 employees, and the fact of the matter is, it's bad enough to have repeat findings. But when I learned that some of these findings go all the way back 2.5 to 3 years, I just felt like that was very unacceptable. And it's very troubling when you have an agency this size that's responsible for 600,000 or 700,000 people, Arkansans, on Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those are on traditional Medicaid, Arkansas Works, and they're responsible for many of the federally funded programs which we have to deal with, which have an impact on the safety and stability of our abused and neglected children all over the state. So that was just very, very troubling to me, because that's going to affect the whole state. I just had a big problem with it. I have sat there for 6 years, heard many of these same excuses over and over and over, and what it came down to, I just about had enough.
You're quoted in the Gazette. I think this agency needs to get its house in order, and they need to do it quickly, because we're talking about a $9 billion agency here. We could be in trouble real quick. Talk about the trouble that they could be in. It would have to do with owing money back to the feds, correct?
Well, that's true. We have, their budget is $9 billion, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't think I am, over $7 billion of that involves federal funding.
Mm-hmm.
And the inability to manage federal funding program, that in and of itself is alarming, because I know the staff at Legislative Audit. They are an independent agency. They're neutral. They don't have a dog in this hunt. And when they say that we could owe $126 million back to the federal government, I don't think that the response of that's not likely is a good answer. I'd rather hear that we're absolutely not going to be on the hook for $126 million having to be paid back to the feds. I mean, and a lot of these programs that were flagged, and I pay close attention to this, these programs that were flagged, the majority of them were receiving federal funds. So it just really caught my attention.
Yeah.
When a lot of these findings involve the reimbursements to providers in the state, the Medicaid program.
So
I mean, that to me is incomprehensible when the staff at DHS are, they're just not being familiar with the rules and regs of CMS. That's very troubling.
I want to talk about accountability. What is the accountability measures here when you have so many mistakes? And we have reports, again, referring back to Hunter Field's article in the Democrat Gazette from earlier in the week, or maybe over the weekend, where you have somebody intentionally, knowingly, purposely falsifying, was it an expense report for the quarter, and just, saying, well, the deadline is due, so I'm just going to submit something that I know to be wrong. What was your reaction with that, and what consequences are going to happen to some of these government employees, if any?
Well, first of all, what they actually done was they used the previous month's records to build these or to send out funds to the providers and they used the excuse that they were afraid they were going to lose some of the providers, some of these patients. But the fact of the matter is that this should have been addressed early on. That should have been one of their top priorities. I think Senator Chesterfield, that brought up a point that she alluded to, that she noticed there was a pattern here. Well, if I remember correctly, I think DHS had just installed a $450 million computer to make sure these kinds of things didn't happen. And that takes me back, Paul, when she brought up the fact that this is a pattern. I can remember back in 2014, right after we had passed private option, that I sat in a joint performance review and questioned Mr. White over $120 million that the state had spent on software to a company in California that never worked. And as far as I know, to this day, we've not recouped any of that $120 million.
Yes.
And it was just a few months later that we had Mr. Seelig in front of Joint Performance Review, and I was the one that asked him a question because it was brought to our attention that we had paid $138 million more than a lot of states, not just that surrounded us, but states over in the east, Alabama and Georgia, South Carolina, states that had populations that were much larger than the state of Arkansas, and yet we had paid $138 million more for the same program for a state that has a fraction of the population. And I will never forget Mr. Seelig's answer, because I asked him, well, how did that occur? And he said, well, Senator, it was a coding problem. And I thought about this the other day, and I thought, we put a lot of emphasis on this coding initiative. We should have started that over at DHS instead of the public school system, because I'm sure those schools could have used that $138 million that we threw away because of a coding error a lot more efficiently than DHS. So, it's things like that that are just, to me, just unacceptable. I mean, we're paying a lot of money, and there was an issue brought up. I don't have that report in front of me, but concerning the high turnover rate, and especially among leadership. Now, these are higher paid, positions. And Senator Collins Smith brought up a good point during the meeting. She asked why Director Gillespie wasn't there. And I don't know why she wasn't there. I don't know if she had a valid reason for not being there. But if she didn't, she should have been there. Because this is serious enough that the director of DHS should be sitting in that chair answering questions about why we've got such a high turnover rate in the supervisory positions at DHS. There's a lot of questions I still have concerning, we were cut off because of time, but I had a lot more questions I sure would like to ask.
Yeah. We're talking with Senator Gary Stubblefield, State Senator for District 6, and he, like I said, was in this hearing where they were going over the audit findings of the DHS, a lot of shortfalls here. Now, Gary, I'm glad that you brought up first of all, the history of the $120 million to the California company that we didn't get back and for software that never worked. I think eventually, if you looked at the whole thing, I think it was like $200 million on software. And by the way, when we start talking about $200 million wasted, you know, it makes $100 million in tax cuts, really puts it into perspective as to how big the Arkansas government is and how much money we're already sending there, and how really a lot of that stuff can be minuscule. But now we're talking about, you said $450 million on another piece of software, and you're saying that maybe is what they were blaming this on. I want to make sure I get this correct. Is that what you're saying? And was the $450 million brought up?
I just remember them putting in some high expensive, and it was in the range of $450 million computer system to take care of all these issues, and apparently it did not. So. It always comes back to the same old thing. They keep blaming it on internal controls and other deficiencies as far as their managerial counting sections, and that to me is not. I mean, that's what they're being paid to do, and I just can't accept that.
So
7,400 employees. And by the way, Paul, I added up. DHS next to K through 12, that's the largest agency in the state of Arkansas. Mm-hmm. They are the biggest agency next to education in the state of Arkansas, and that's not higher ed. And they have 7,400 employees. 3,900 of those, I think I added up, 3,900 of those were in. They have budgeted positions for like 7,700, but 3,200 of those positions were filled. And they're staffed with people who work directly with patients or clients of AHC or Human Development Centers. And then they have 450 some odd positions and another 260 positions that work with Division of Youth Services. That leaves, when you subtract those, that still leaves 3,270 positions. And if those 3,270 people cannot handle these federal programs and grants, knowing that the federal government right now is, I mean, I read a lot of things that come out of Washington, and they're certainly wanting to cut programs as far as the EPA and a lot of other welfare programs. So I don't think we can, just count on all this money to keep coming out of Washington, D.C. And we certainly need to know the rules and regulations as far as what the waivers permit and what they don't permit. Mm-hmm. And there was no waivers for writing these checks out to these providers.
So, Gary, this and I'm going to go look this $400 million thing up. But was that figure actually brought up in the meeting the other day?
No, that was not brought up.
Okay, I'm just making sure, because if we see, that has slipped through the cracks to me. So that's news to me. So I would be interested in any information about another computer system that they put in to try to deal with all of this. And if it sounds to me like, if I were a gambling man, I would say, well, it looks like we're continuing to have software problems. We're continuing to spend money to try to manage this with these contracting with these companies, and we're not able to keep track of. Well, I mean, surprise, surprise, we're not able to keep track of a big government program.
Right. I'm not sure it would be more efficient just to give them a pencil and a piece of paper and let them do it manually.
Yeah. Or use an Excel sheet. I've heard some people tell me that this could be done on an Excel sheet.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the findings was they had underreported $10 or $12 million for that quarter, and they blamed it on a communications breakdown between the medical services and the accounting division. And for an agency this size and with the assets they have, that like I said, that's just unacceptable to me.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be happening. It should not be happening. And putting at risk the the health care of our children and all these programs, federally funded programs. That is set up to be a safety net for struggling Arkansans, and it's to provide safety and stability for all these neglected children, and they should not be doing anything that would jeopardize that.
Yeah. We're talking with Senator Gary Stubblefield. While I have you just a little bit longer, I just want to get your opinion on what we can expect next year, or what your goals are next year when it comes to the tax policy debate, and what are you hearing on that? I mean, I know the task force on tax relief is meeting, and they've proposed a lot of exemptions to look at potentially ending. One of them is the grocery tax. But what are you hearing about that?
In Arkansas, every single hour there is a politician not getting what they want. For some, it's an absolute nightmare. The sleepless nights wondering if progress will ever come. Lying awake pondering how to grow government in this political climate. Asking questions like, why don't my constituents want to pay a few cents more in taxes? Everyday politicians feel abused and neglected. These politicians are starving for power. They're hungry, confused, and they don't understand why no one seems to care. Will you be a patriot and commit today to help these poor, starved for power public officials? It's simple. All you have to do is commit to stay silent and never dissent or stand in the way of your politicians' rise to power. Never speak up or get engaged to stop the growth of government. By committing to these simple steps, you will ensure the life of your politician will be filled with contentment and the respect they are desperately seeking, as well as campaign contributions from lobbyists.
This message brought to you by Aristocrats Serving Arkansas.
PHP Parody.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
We're talking with Senator Gary Stubblefield. While I have you just a little bit longer, I just want to get your opinion on what we can expect next year, or what your goals are next year when it comes to the tax policy debate, and what are you hearing on that? I mean, I know the task force on tax relief is meeting, and they've proposed a lot of exemptions to look at potentially ending. One of them is the grocery tax. But what are you hearing about that? Because I want actual tax relief. I don't want tax shifting. What do you say?
Well, when I first heard, when I first saw the report of some of the tax exemptions and the taxes that they were planning on doing away with, one of those exemptions was a bill that I passed under Democratic governor, Governor Beebe. I will never forget it. Was a sales twine tax exemption, which amounted to about $1.5 million. Every state surrounding the state of Arkansas had a tax exemption on baling twine, cotton wrap, and I think the financial impact on that was like $1.5 million. And the day I filed it, I remember running into Governor Beebe in the rotunda or somewhere close to the House then, and he told me, he said, you need to go ahead and just drop that bill, because he said it's not going to pass, and even if it does, I'll veto it. Well, we got it through with some help of some House members on the other end. Not only did we pass it through both houses, but Governor Beebe signed it. And I noticed it was included in this package, but I really don't think that the governor's going to touch the agricultural exemptions. And I can't even imagine him going to the grocery part. I mean, it was Governor Beebe who reduced that grocery tax, and I can't imagine raising. I'm not voting for any tax increases or removing any exemption.
Really?
Period.
Wow. Well, I mean,
not till we get some other things worked out.
Yeah.
And some of these other agencies, such as DHS, and find out where a lot of this waste is going.
Well, I think that's the right attitude to have.
Because when you're throwing away hundreds of millions of dollars because of the incompetence of an agency, these little tax cuts, like the exemption on sales, I mean, baling twine, that's $1.5 million. That's nothing. And every state around the state of Arkansas is exempt. We're going to have farmers just driving over to Oklahoma, Missouri, Tennessee, and filling up the trailers with baling twine and cotton wrap. And while they're there, they'll spend money on gas and food and who knows what else. So we're not only helping their economies, we're hurting our own.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's amazing. I said from the beginning, as far as a task force on taxes, isn't this the biggest divide between Republicans and Democrats? Is, our view of the economy and our view of tax cuts, and why did we even need further debate? I mean, come on, lower taxes, shrink the size of government, put more money back into small business owners' pockets so they can invest in their business and hire more people. I mean, that's what Republicans campaign on. Why can't we just do that?
Well, that's exactly what we need to be doing. I mean, that's the way the founders intend for this whole thing to be set up. It was never set up for the government to be doing what they're doing right now. But we've gotten so large and out of control that it's going to take some very conservative decisions, and it may take some pain to get this thing back in order. But I'm not giving up.
Good. Well, neither are we.
I'm not giving up.
Neither are we. Neither are the people. And I appreciate you so much, Senator Gary Stubblefield. Thanks so much for standing for conservative values, and we will do this again soon.
Well, thank you for having me on, Paul.
All righty. Thank you, Senator Gary Stubblefield, everybody. We're going to take a break. This is Conduit News Radio. I'm Paul Harrell. Back in just a moment.
I think you and I have talked since I made the trip down to the border and saw how the drug cartels are operating on the U.S. side of the border. They've got spotters out in the hills. I've witnessed it firsthand with the Border Patrol closing in on a group of illegals that had crossed the border. And as the 3 Border Patrol vehicles closed in on them, that group split into 2 groups, and we went after the front group, and they split into 3 groups. And it's because there was a spotter up in the mountain monitoring where the Border Patrol was moving. And, the amount of drugs that are coming across the southern border are unreal. 192 pounds of fentanyl in 3 months was seized crossing the southern border. That was testimony in the committee that I chair.
Wow.
On oversight on federal lands there along the border. And to do the math on that, 2 milligrams of fentanyl will kill a person, so 192 pounds is enough to kill about 43 million people. That's what they seized in 3 months along the southern border.
Well, so something's got to be done about this, and the Trump administration is trying to do everything they can. And I think at this point, I mean, this is, the wall funding and everything else, and the military, being used in this capacity. Do you think there's any chance that the military, in terms of national defense, I mean, there's been some reports on this that Trump's just going to use military and the funding he got with the omnibus to build the wall? Have you heard anything about that?
Well, I think he's like a bulldog on this. It's a very important issue to him, and he wants to see that southern border secure. I'm for a wall and a physical barrier through there, but it's worse than that. There are places along the border where there's not even a road, and it's in wilderness areas, and there are environmental laws that don't allow the Border Patrol to put roads in. So for the agents to get in there, they either have to walk in or ride a horse or get dropped in by a helicopter. So there's a whole lot we could do that's going to have to be done. You can't build a wall along the border without a road along the border, and a road along the border that was paved where they could have better access would go a long way as far as stopping a lot of the illegal crossings.
Congressman Bruce,
but we don't even have that right now.
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. Yeah, we would definitely need to fix some of those EPA laws. Congressman Bruce Westerman, I appreciate you coming on the program. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Paul, and I appreciate you talking about issues that are important. Talking about the debt, the deficit, and it's not all the time I get media folks that want to talk about that. So thank you.
Hey, absolutely. Anytime. We'll do this again in a couple of weeks.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
You're listening to the best of Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Here to help us do that, we have from Political Strategy, Mr. Josh Waters is back with us. Josh, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing pretty good, Paul. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Now, you were in the courtroom yesterday, the public corruption trial for Senator John Woods and this big general improvement kickback scheme. What's your impression of how the proceedings went yesterday?
I guess my overall impression was a little mixed. I think the first two witnesses yesterday clearly helped the prosecution, and I think the third witness was kind of mixed as it relates to Randall Shelton's defense. But I think the first two witnesses, especially the first one, Mr. Dwayne Pratt, he talked about, he's the executive director of the West Central Arkansas Planning and Development District out of Hot Springs, and he talked about basically, what you've been talking about for years, Paul, came out in open court yesterday, that this GIS scheme that they had set up was, it was a sham, and that the legislators truly did control it.
Really? I mean, so that's pretty clear then. I mean, everybody now knows the legislators do control it. This idea that they get to wash their hands and absolve themselves because it didn't come from me, it came from the planning district, is now proven to be a lie.
Yes, and, there's two specific examples as it relates to this case of how that was true. First was there was a $50,000 grant of this GIS funds that originally came from the Western Central Arkansas Planning and Development District that was awarded to Ecclesia College. This was in December of 2013, and they were first contacted by Senator John Woods, but the senator that actually put his name on to sponsor it was Senator Michael Amaro. And Paul, this grant, $50,000 of taxpayer money, was sent to this college without them even applying for it. And the reason that Mr. Pratt gave for them, meeting as a board and saying, yes, we approve, without even having an application, was because they feared the repercussions from the legislators of what would happen if they didn't approve this when they wanted them to.
Wow. And the witness said that. You're saying Dwayne Pratt, he said that on the stand, that they went ahead and sent the money without an application to Ecclesia because they were afraid of, which legislator? Were they afraid of Michael Lamoureux? Is that the one they were talking about?
He said legislators. I assume it was Lamoureux because that's who the person was to actually sponsor it. And then so that, they didn't have the application. They said, yes, we'll approve this. They got the application later. And then Senator John Woods personally came by and picked up the $50,000 check and took it up to the college.
I noticed in the Doug Thompson report, there was a question asked, is that normal? Does a senator normally come to the commission to personally pick up the check? And what was the answer to that?
Never. It's never happened before.
That's so strange. Oh my goodness, this whole thing is extremely strange. But it is like you said, it is something that it's been of discussion for a long time in conservative circles of what this really is, and it doesn't appear, and now does appear to be exactly what people were saying it is. How do you get? So you got $50,000 that's sent to Ecclesia College before they even apply for it, but then they got another $50,000 grant, Josh. And was there, I guess maybe with both of these, the way I'm reading it in Doug Thompson's piece has to do with different deadlines, that maybe they were past the deadline and there was also some more bullying going on. Can you tell us about the deadline infractions?
Yes, so that first $50,000, I guess they have cycles. I'm not sure, the time period on those, but basically it's like, okay, here's a round of grants that they're going to approve, and then they come back and say, okay, we're going to approve these again. So the very next cycle, another $50,000 were approved from this, planning district that was outside, it was down in Hot Springs, not in Northwest Arkansas. But another $50,000 was approved, and the man testified that the date that had been stamped on the application, they actually filled the application out the second time and sent it in, but the date that was stamped was the date the application was due. But he testified that was not when it was actually received, that someone had, changed the date on that. And so the second $50,000 was also awarded and sent on like nothing was wrong, even though they didn't even meet the application deadline.
Wow. It seems like really the entire process has been a deception, from the time the legislature votes themselves the general improvement funds to every process. The opportunity for corruption here and deception and changing this date or sending this check when they haven't even applied for it yet. I mean, it really just seems like the entire process is being exposed as corrupt. I mean, is that your general feeling from being in the courtroom yesterday?
Yes. With Mr. Pratt's testimony combined with a few others who have testified, I would assume the jury is probably seeing through this idea that, actually we set up a system, and the defense tried to argue that. They tried to say, well, you had a board, right? And the board had to approve this, right? It wasn't just what the legislator says goes. And I think the jury's probably seen through that with the cumulative testimony that's been provided, saying, no, the legislators really controlled this. This was just, a sham system we set up to try to get around a Supreme Court ruling.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's been well established in the trial so far.
Can we talk about? We're talking with Josh Waters. He was in the courtroom yesterday, the public corruption trial of John Woods. Can we talk about specifically the contract that Ecclesia College had with Paradigm? I think it was Paradigm Strategies or Paradigm Consulting. That the government, and see, this is from Doug Thompson, the government contends a contract with an outside consultant to raise funds was a sham used to pass along the kickbacks. The defense contends the contract was a long-term project that was derailed because of the federal investigation. And Patrick Benka, who is the defense attorney for John Woods, asked a person on the stand by the last name of Novak, quote, would it be fair to say that once this investigation started, meaning the federal investigation, funds began to dry up? Novak replied, yes, meaning so. I thought that was interesting. I reread it several times because to me it seems like the defense is making the prosecution's case, but that the funds would be drying up because now the feds are involved and they know they're going to get caught. Were you there for that exchange? Was it? I mean, maybe it reads different than it was in real life.
Yes, I was there, and basically the line of questioning that was involved there was basically trying to show. The defense's theory is that, like you said, well, Mr. Shelton was legitimately hired as a consultant, and so the prosecution called Mike Novak and had questioned him at length, and then Mr. Benka was doing the cross-examination there. And so their theory, they're trying to undermine the theory that this was a sham consulting job by saying, well, he did a little bit, here or there, and trying to bring up examples of work he had done for the college and meetings he had attended. And so that's the context of that question. And Mr. Novak was very quick to talk about how Mr. Shelton had been involved in the college, and there was a lot of testimony trying to humanize, I guess, the college, and trying to make them not look bad. It was what the defense was trying to do yesterday, in a lot of
okay. So it seems to from your characterization, it seems like I did miss the context, because when the defense says, "Would it be fair to say that once this investigation started, funds began to dry up?" Are they talking about other fundraising that Randall Shelton was allegedly attempting to do? Is that what you're saying?
Well, basically what they described as the relationship in the line of questioning that came out was that Randall Shelton was a consultant, and he basically gave recommendations of possible foundations they could reach out to, and he had some contacts at some of the local foundations that he tried to set up meetings for them. And that question, though, was basically saying, well, once this investigation happened, you couldn't even have these meetings. No one would meet with you. The fundraising that people had said, yeah, we might want to give, was dried up. People who gave in the past had stopped giving. So they actually went through some of the larger donors back from, 2012, 2013, and went through all the donors, and the prosecution was trying to say, well, Randall Shelton didn't help you get any of this money. And outside of, I think, of two donations, one last year, the answer was no, he didn't really execute and get the money.
It's like, well, the federal investigation made it hard to do my job. Was it the federal investigation, or was it the kickbacks that made it hard to do your job? Which one was it? Wow. Okay. So I think that definitely cleared it up for me, Josh. I appreciate it. We're talking again with Josh Waters about the public corruption trial of John Woods. He was in the courtroom yesterday. Did they talk any about where the I guess the totality of funds and these kickback allegations? They went to buy a piece of land for Ecclesia College, and did they talk any about? Did they ever develop that land? I mean, they did purchase the land, but, I mean, has anything even been done with that land? Did that come up at all in court yesterday?
Yes, and that was really kind of fuzzy because the witness he didn't seem to have a real grasp on a lot of the details of really anything that went on at the college. So that it was kind of fuzzy, but he talked about, I think he called it the Hollingsworth house that had been purchased to use as student dorms, and that's being used as student dorms, and then another house that had been purchased for staff housing. But what was unclear was, and how much money they were asking for in GIF grants versus what they got, and how much of that money went to secure these properties and keep them going. So that was unclear, but what was really interesting was, they went through, I mean, there's probably 10 to 15 legislators' names that were read into the record from a lot of these documents about, getting this GIS money there. And so I thought that was very, kind of interesting that you're sitting here in court and 10, 15, 20 legislators' names are getting read off, and the witness didn't know who they were, and I bet most people in the courtroom didn't know who they were, but, people who follow politics in Arkansas are probably thinking, oh, man, why is his name involved in this? Why is this legislator's name involved?
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Were there any legislators? I know on Tuesday, Doug Thompson reported Senator Bart Hester testified. Were there any legislators that testified yesterday?
No, there were no legislators that testified yesterday. But Nate Bell was announced that he was going to be witness number 4, and they're still on witness number 3 from yesterday.
All right, so that's State Representative Nate Bell, or former State Representative Nate Bell. Mm-hmm. He's called as a witness. Any idea what that could be about, or did anything happen with that yesterday?
Yes, that was actually the very first thing yesterday morning was the counsel, I think it was the defense, brought a motion to try to prevent Mr. Bell. They had gotten word or seen an email or something that Mr. Bell was going to release some type of press release about him testifying there that day. So they're wanting to try to prevent that press release from going out before he testified, so people can kind of know what he's going to testify about. And the government's position was, we can't really stop someone from their First Amendment right to speak.
Well,
it's kind of bizarre. That was how the
day started. That state representative, former state representative Nate Bell wants to make a press release before he testifies.
Yeah. So,
man.
Yeah, but there were no legislators that testified. But, I made a list in my notes, and a lot of legislators were named. Of course, John Woods, Bart Hester, Bob Ballinger's name came up for donating. Cecile Bledsoe, Michael Lamoureux was a lot of the discussion in the morning. Charlie Collins, Randy Alexander, Deborah Hobbs. There's some email exchanges talking about trying to set up meetings with Stephen Meeks, David Meeks, Jason Raper, David Sanders about presentations with Ecclesia. So it was just, kind of fascinating. There are so many legislators seemed involved in trying to direct money to this college.
Yeah, and it seemed to be, from what I can tell, it was because it was a Christian college. Okay, let me rephrase. Because it is a Christian college. It's the Greek word for church, ecclesia. It did seem to be at least in the legislator's mind at the time, a noble thing to do. Send it to this Christian university that's, we all understand the liberal bent that most universities have and what they're doing to young people and that sort of thing. And so I can understand. I guess the reason I say that, Josh, is, their names are being mentioned, but, we want to be clear that doesn't necessarily mean, any wrongdoing necessarily. But
right.
Is that, do you agree with that, or what do you think?
Yeah, no, these were just, and it was, in just emails that came up that were, okay, we're having a meeting with this legislator. They said these legislators might be willing to direct money. But I just thought it was, kind of fascinating that there are all these legislators from all over different parts of the state. But like you said, and I actually think the defense did a pretty good job of humanizing the college because, I think a lot of people have heard of College of the Ozarks, and Ecclesia is kind of trying to go with that model of a work college, and very noble, and the witness talked about how it was a ministry. I think a lot of people support that aspect of it. Absolutely. I would, support that aspect of it. But what's happened since then is, I think, where people have run into support issues. But I thought they did a good job of humanizing the college and talking about what their goals were. And you never know the makeup of a jury, but, I wrote in my notes, I have just here, there's a lot of, conservative, supporting our values, the Christian college, Christ Center. And so my thought is if the jury, which you never know, but if the jury is more conservative, I think that probably helps the defense, at least based on yesterday's testimony.
Yeah, well, it's certainly going to be interesting. I mean, this all keeps coming out, and what when it comes to the fact that we have multiple legislators and, you have multiple lobbyists that are involved in a general improvement kickback scheme where you direct general improvement money here and then you get a little on the side, and the fact that we have multiple legislators involved in receiving the kickbacks, there's a chance that more people knew that was going on. There's also a chance that nobody knew that was going on. We just don't know until the facts come out. But anyway, Josh Waters, man, I appreciate you coming to the program. Is there anything else that the audience needs to know about what happened, or do we pretty well cover everything?
There's only one other witness, and there wasn't much there. Mr. Keith Cottle. He works for an accounting group that represents Ecclesia. He was mainly just there testifying as the custodian of records, the one who had kept a lot of the financial records that they were needing to get into evidence. But that was the only other witness, and then they recess for the day, and they'll start back again this morning.
All righty. Josh Waters with Political Strategy. It's always a pleasure. Thanks for updating us, sir.
Yes, you're welcome. Absolutely. Have a great day.
All righty. You too, folks.
Buy, sell, and trade at Triple R Pawn in Ash Flat. Firearms, computers, sporting goods, musical instruments, tools, jewelry, and everything else you can think of. It's all at Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat. Gun enthusiasts, log on now to triplrpawn.com and browse their amazing inventory. That's triplrpawn.com. You can also call them at 870-994-PAWN. That's 870-994-7296. Let the great team at Triple R Pawn help you find what you're looking for. That's Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat, triplrpawn.com, or call 870-994-PAWN.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Money, power, prestige, essence, available now from aristocrats serving Arkansas. From the Nata Rhino collection, the fragrance
of backroom deals. Nepotism. The aroma of higher taxes. Subliminal deception. Deep state. Ace. Made right here in Arkansas by a taxpayer-funded Chinese factory. Every bottle carefully crafted for you. Gender neutral. Nothing says aristocrat like Essence of Bureaucrat. Essence of Bureaucrat by Asa.
Available now in the Marble Palace gift shop.
Paul Harrell parody. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
For this? All right, here we go. It's time for the Conduit Quiz, the weekly event where we always say knowledge is power. Today, what we will be looking at is Governor Asa Hutchinson's spending habits. That's right. During the current Republican primary for governor between Jan Morgan and Governor Hutchinson, Asa has been promoting the $100 million income tax cuts in his first term in office. What he might not tell you is, during his first term in office, spending has increased over $600 million. If you cut taxes by $100 million, but increase spending by $600 million, did government get bigger or smaller? This quiz highlights the spending increases in each fiscal year since Asa has been governor. All right, Joe. So here we go. Now, last week, I want to remind everybody, Joe made a 67%. He did terrible.
I was really hoping you say 66%, and I go, no, 67 if you round up.
No, 67. You corrected me last hour. And the week before that, you made a 16. Ooh, sorry about that.
I'm moving up.
I don't think you're going to have any trouble, but just so you know, we don't really enforce these rules very much, but this sound means you're out of time if we that one. All right, so if like you're just taking too long and you're, pontificating, you hear that sound, we're gonna need an answer. We're gonna need an answer. And then, like, after the fact, after we're all done, for a correct answer, we may give you one of these. You get that one. And then, of course, if you get a wrong answer, then, we like to boo you. I don't think you're going to get very many of those, though, Joe. I really don't. So, let's go ahead and go to question number 1, shall we? Here's question number 1. In fiscal year 2016, how much did state spending increase under Governor Asa Hutchinson?
This one's easy.
Was it A, $1 million? Was it